Good morning. I'm Karen Tucker-Barisano. I had no idea I would be following such a moving opening in gathering video. That was very, quite amazing. So I am a member of the Standing Committee, a new member, and a very proud member and long-term member of the RE Committee, which has a very full plate lately. And we just met with the children this morning before our service and actually discussed Martin Luther King and his big words. We want the families to know that the February packet will be coming out soon and that we have Zooms in February on February 7 and 21 for the children. The Greater Littleton Interfaith Council is sponsoring a vigil today for racial justice, and it will be between 2 and 3. They're gathering on the Littleton Common and the lawn, and also the lawn in front of the Baptist Church. Remember your masks, social distancing will be observed. You may bring signs for justice, peace, civility, solidarity. Check Community Matters for further details. Also, I want to call your attention, there's a wonderful segment by Carolyn Marvin representing the RJAC group, and she shared a link to the entire text of Amanda Gorman's inaugural poem, May We Be Brave to Be the Light. Such an amazing poem. If you would like to be part of a small group ministry, we've formed 4 small groups in the Soul Matters format. So it's not too late to join if you'd like. And if you're interested, please let Reverend Laura know. The Committee on Ministry would like to offer a huge thank you to all the volunteers that are sustaining us right now, as we have been trying to fill the position of a new DRE and our office administrator. So much appreciation goes out to all those folks on the RE committee and those who have been volunteering in the office. Flash bulletin. I am on the stewardship gathering committee, and we have moved the date to Saturday, February 27 from 4:30 to 6. It will be via Zoom, so mark your calendars. Our team is creating a really fun and interactive program that we hope you will plan to attend. And as is our style, we will have some delicious to-go meals, and you will hear more about that so you can make your menu selections. The theme for this year is celebrating our silver linings in abundance of gifts. Check Community Matters. We have more info on that there. Want to call your attention to a series, the Spiritual Physics Research Discussion Series, which starts Friday, January 29 for the next 5 months from 7 to 8:30. Reverend Laura will provide a framework for the topic each evening, and then Doug Sweetser will present an issue in physics with the current approach and detail its limitations. Check Community Matters for how you may sign up for this. There will be a streamed, free of charge performance of Deeper Than the Skin, which is a musical presentation by singers and storytellers Reggie Harris and Greg Greenway. And this will be happening next Saturday, the 30th at 7 p.m. There's an option to make donations to the Massachusetts Food Bank, and that information will be provided at the time. It's a very, very special experience, if you will. And it is sponsored by the UU churches in our area, along with the Greater Littleton Interfaith Council and the Maynard Anti-Racism Alliance. So check your Community Matters for if you're interested in participating in that. So I wish you a wonderful day in this very chilly temperature and a wonderful week. Thank you so much.
Good morning. My name is Molly Lozeau. I'm the music director at First Church Unitarian. And I'd like to introduce the Prelude for today. You're going to be hearing a piano-only version of Take 5. Now, this was a piece written by Paul Desmond in, the late 1950s. And it's been performed in many different versions. I'd say if you've heard this piece before, you might have heard it as a piano solo, and you also might have heard it by the Dave Brubeck Quintet. This was a quintet that was playing a lot in the 60s, and it incorporated piano and some other instruments along with drums. So here is Take 5.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Jackie Clement. My husband, John Ford, and I have been members of this wonderful congregation for 31 years now. And I'm so glad to be with you this morning, and even happier that you are here with me. If you're visiting with us for the first time, know that we extend an especially warm welcome. If you have any questions about this community or Unitarian Universalism in general, I invite you to check out our website at fculittle.org or look on Facebook for us as First Church Unitarian Littleton. Beginning with gratitude is always a good way to start anything. So please join me in thanks for the many people who contributed to today's service. Their names were in the gathering video, and their gifts are much appreciated. Let us worship.
Come in, not to a physical place, but one that we share nonetheless. Come into community. Come in with all your vulnerabilities and strengths, fears and anxieties, loves and hopes. For here you need not hide, nor pretend, nor be anything other than who you are called to be. Come into this place where hearts can touch and be healed and forgive, and you can forgive and be forgiven. Come into this place where the ordinary is sanctified, the human is celebrated, the compassionate is expected. Come into this place. Together, we make it a holy place. These words, based on those of Becky Edmiston-Lange, gather us into sacred time. Julia McManus will lead us in lighting our chalice and speaking the words of our sacred shared covenant, which we do each week to mark this time in the life of our community. If you have a chalice or candle, I invite you to light it at this time as we join together in the words of our covenant.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service is law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Our opening hymn this morning is number 131, Love Will Guide Us. Please join as we are led by our fellow Unitarian Universalists from Baltimore.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us, will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us, will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.
I invite everyone to gather around for a story this morning. This morning's story is called Lightning and the Ladybugs. And like most good stories, it begins on a beautiful sunny day as a group of glossy red ladybugs was walking through their leafy land. They came upon a very tiny, very young, very lost looking bit of a bug. It surely wasn't a ladybug because it had no beautiful red shell or glossy black dots or even graceful wings. But it did seem very small and frail and alone. So the ladybugs knew that they must take care of it, and they carried the tiny stranger home with them. In the coming days, they fed it tender grasses and gave it clear water to drink and a soft leaf to keep it warm at night. And the tiny insect began to gain strength and grow larger because, bugs grow very fast. But still, it wasn't a beautiful ladybug. It was gangly and clumsy, and it had this big bump at one end. Awkward, said one of the ladybugs. Awkward, the others agreed. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with ladybug culture, but dancing is a very, very popular activity. The new bug tried to join in all of the dance parties, but more often than not, it tripped over its own feet or
Worse, it tripped all the other dancers. Awkward, the other ladybugs would agree. Eventually, the ladybugs taught the newcomer to fly, but it wasn't the graceful glide of a ladybug. It was more of a nerve-jangling darting this way and then that way until you were quite dizzy, and it was, well, awkward. And then one night, just at bedtime, the big bump at one end of our new friend lit up like a light bulb, just for a fraction of a second, and then it blinked out again. Everyone laughed and said it looked like a flash of lightning. Awkward, said one of the ladybugs. Awkward, another affirmed. Annoying, said a third, who had just been dropping off to sleep when the flash awakened her. In the nights that followed, lightning, as our new friend was now called, continued to flash on and off, not once, but many, many times, on and off, on and off. The ladybugs agreed that this had gone well beyond awkward and called a council to decide what to do about this embarrassing and rather disruptive behavior. But just as the ladybugs were all crowding together to hold their council, a beam of moonlight hit their bold red wings, and a passing crow spotted them. The crow dived for what it thought would make a tasty bedtime snack, and the ladybugs scattered in horror, running for their very lives. Lightning continued her flashing. On and off, as she took to her erratic zigzag flight this way and that. The ladybugs watched, horrified, as the crow spotted lightning's flashes. The crow chased her. Yikes, their friend was sure to be eaten. But then on and on she flew, zigging this way and zagging that way, here first, over there next. The poor crow couldn't keep up, and eventually it flew off in disgust to go get some rest. That night, the ladybugs danced until it was very late indeed, and a new ballad was written celebrating the joys of lightning bugs who saved their friends by flashing on and off, on and off. Not awkward at all, they agreed, but very, very helpful. And that's our story for today, which tells us something that might seem awkward might also be very useful indeed. And now Monica will share with us a reading about a real experience of awkwardness.
The following passage from The Moon's a Balloon by the actor David Niven describes his New York opening night playing the lover of Gloria Swanson in the play Nina. I moved across the stage to admit my lover. I was ill prepared for what I saw. She had, I thought, worn some rather off garments in Hartford, Boston, and Philadelphia, but now the Pilgrim Company had really excelled itself. Swanson stood there enveloped in a black taffeta tent. She stepped forward, and a gasp of horror mingled with the applause. She smiled seductively at her lover, and I was supposed to smile. I tried, but I was so nervous and my mouth so dry that my upper lip became stuck above my teeth, and I stood there leering at her like a mad rabbit. Unfortunately, in my terror of the whole situation, I squeezed too hard in that initial clinch. There was a loud report. This was followed by a twanging noise. 8 inches of white whalebone shot out of Swanson's chest and straight up my nose. The audience was delighted. Something new at last. They roared with laughter. Swanson half turned to see what was happening, thereby stirring the whalebone around in my sinus. Tears of pain streamed down my face, but in my innocence of things theatrical, I thought maybe it didn't show. And with my gopher teeth gleaming in the limelight, I carried bravely on with the scene. The audience hooted, and the flop sweat broke out all over me like a dew. Down in the area of my navel, Swanson hissed, "What the hell is going on?"
Thank you, Monica. Like all congregations, this one is self-supporting. The great gift of that is that we get to govern ourselves. We get to call the minister that we want to covenant with. We get to worship as we please, even telling stories from the world of theater. But the great responsibility that comes with that is that it's up to us to care for our community, for each other, for our minister and our staff, and for our historic building, even when we don't get to use it. But mostly, the money that you give to the church isn't about any of those things. It is about the mission of this congregation, to be a loving community and to be a voice for progressive religion, a house for all people. In order to support that vision, you can send a check to the church at 19 Foster Street, Littleton, Massachusetts, or you can click on the yellow donate button on our website at fculittle.org. Whatever is given in love is received with great gratitude. May we be always worthy of your gifts.
As you make your offering today, you will hear Gnossienne number 1 by Eric Satie, a composer that at his time of writing in the late 1800s was deemed very awkward and very quote unquote wrong. He wrote harmonies and he wrote music that went against a lot of the romantic movement that was happening. And as you listen to it, you might think, oh, well, it doesn't sound too strange. But if you look at it, he didn't use bar lines. He often didn't use key signatures. He was breaking a lot of the traditions of classical music that had been well established by other French composers like Debussy and Ravel and a lot of those other mid-1800s composers. So I wanted to include this because it's very beautiful, I think, and it shows grace within awkwardness.
This reading is from Cringeworthy by Melissa Dahl. As I've studied the facts of awkwardness, I've gotten an unexpected sense of common humanity out of it. Individual traits like introversion or shyness or neuroticism, which can feel isolating. If it's a feeling like other good old-fashioned American emotions, such as happiness or envy or curiosity, then it's a concept we can all recognize. There's no such thing as an embarrassing moment, Oprah Winfrey has said, because I know that there is not a moment that I could possibly experience that somebody else hasn't already experienced. I don't mean to fight with Oprah, but the fact of the apparent universality of embarrassment or awkwardness doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It means exactly the opposite, and it underlines the importance of the feeling. The things that make you cringe are usually the things worth sharing because they can help others feel less alone. You experience this every time you feel secondhand embarrassment for somebody else. I dated a sensitive soul in the mid-2000s who had to leave the room when we watched the American Idol auditions together because he was so uncomfortable for the singers who were embarrassing themselves on national television. He felt their pain as if it were his own. It's an understandable reaction to flee the situation that makes you cringe. But what if you could teach yourself to tolerate it? You could maybe learn to use the empathy as a route to compassion for other people and for yourself. Looked at in a certain light, cringing becomes a worthwhile feeling, an emotion worth exploring, not avoiding. Little humiliations can bring people together if we let them. The ridiculous in me honors the ridiculous in you.
Thank you, Monica. My earliest cringeworthy recollection actually happened in a church, specifically at the Strawberry Shortcake Festival of the Mount Freedom Presbyterian Church circa 1961. I ask you to picture a church social hall filled with folding tables where church members and friends have just consumed a mountain of strawberry shortcakes in aid of the church's general fund. After the last paying customer has left, the kitchen crew, including my parents, sits down to finish off the last of the strawberries and maybe enjoy a little social time together. A few family members, me, age 5, and Madeline Knuth, age 284, are included in the circle. Now, I pause in the story to ask you to bring to mind a person who would be named Madeline Knuth. Upright, stern, the model of forbidding rectitude covered in black bombazine. Now, with this picture clearly in mind, let us return to the story. As my father leaned across the table to prepare what was the very last shortcake for me, something in the universe snapped, or more precisely, something in the can of whipped cream snapped. And my father ended up spraying a stream of whipped cream all over the front of Madeline Knuth. Almost everyone at the table burst into laughter, except for me. I burst into tears. I submit that although I wasn't a direct participant in the awkwardness of the wayward whipped cream, nevertheless, in that moment, I was the reflection of every person who ever leaned in for a first kiss only to clunk foreheads. Every person who spilled coffee on themselves during a job interview. Every person who tried to preach a sermon over Zoom for the first time. With the full self-centered worldview of a 5-year-old, I knew it was all about me. Because my father was making a shortcake for me when the whipped cream made Madeline its victim, then everyone must be laughing at me. I had somehow broken social expectations, and I was being ridiculed and ostracized by the group. This might seem like a funny and charming childhood reminiscence, but I think it truly does speak to what we feel when we pull off something truly awkward. Embarrassed, even perhaps mortified, shame, fear, sweaty palms, reddened face, a riot of limbic system reactions telling us to freeze, maybe no one will notice us, or flee before they realize what we did. The dead certainty is that at last we have shown our true colors as being unworthy. And that's the real fear, being unworthy. Not a cute, charming childhood recollection at all, but the very real fear of being a social outcast. Belonging is one of our most basic needs. It's now recognized by psychologists to be as important as food or shelter. After more than 30 years of research, Ed Diener from the University of Illinois found that the biggest impact on happiness isn't how much you earn or what you have. It's not where you live or your job. The best predictor of happiness is whether you have strong social relationships. We need each other. There are far few things that are far more psychologically devastating than the feeling of social exclusion. So when we miss those social cues, when we do the wrong thing, when we say the wrong thing, when we fail to say anything at all, we jeopardize our place in the group. Though the vast majority of awkward situations are little more than fodder for internet memes, the feeling that accompanies them is a challenge to a core human need. And here's some more bad news. Modern society is making awkwardness more and more common. In his book, simply titled Awkward, psychologist Tai Tashiro talks about how social expectations have shifted. For the majority of human history, for hundreds, thousands of years, the things that proved our hunter-gatherer ancestors worthy of living in a cooperative society were qualities like loyalty, kindness, generosity, fair play. So you shook hands to prove that you weren't carrying any weapons, and you donated to charity to demonstrate generosity and care for those who had less. Now, with urbanization and the inability to know everyone around you deeply, instant judgments of belonging get hung more on displays of social or economic status. Things like how you dress, what you drive, what job you have. As Tashiro says, today we obsess about the sleekness of our phones or the skinniness of our jeans. And while there's nothing wrong with having a phone or pants, the problem arises when we make this the priority, when we make temporary social expectations and goods the currency we trade in with one another. When we elevate what is fleeting or inaccessible to the status of social expectation, we create fertile ground for awkwardness. And that begins to take a toll on our spirits. It makes life seem less meaningful and us more isolated. And right now is a time of isolation unlike any we have ever experienced. While we can connect through technology, life online is not like life in person. Body language is obscured as we talk to disembodied heads on screens. Camera magnified faces seem 6 inches away, violating the social expectations of 18 inches of personal space. But if we do actually get to see a person in person, then our personal space suddenly jumps to 72 inches, 4 times what Americans find comfortable. It hardly matters that we're so far apart, though, since you're talking to somebody whose face is largely covered by a mask. I don't know if you've had such an experience, but I stood for a full 2 minutes staring at someone in a grocery store. Awkward already, right? To finally figure out that it was someone I had known for 25 years. But only after she said, "Jackie, is that you?" Seriously, awkward. 2020 has a lot to answer for. But along with all of these frequent challenges to our spiritual selves, awkwardness does actually offer us gifts if only we can learn to move through the discomfort. Awkwardness is the great leveler of society. If David Niven, for all his natural charm, supported by a host of scriptwriters, costumers, and lighting designers, still ends up with a whalebone up his nose, who are we to defy the gods of clumsy? If we embrace what our awkward moments have to teach us, we can learn a lot about ourselves. As the philosopher Alain de Botton wrote, if we are not regularly deeply embarrassed by who we are, the journey to self-knowledge hasn't begun. The feelings of self-consciousness and embarrassment we experience are signals that something has gone wrong. Usually what went wrong is that we revealed something about ourselves that we wish others didn't know. That we don't know all the right things to say, that we are not physically graceful or socially adept as we thought. That we alone are not the exception to the awkwardness rule. It highlights what or who is important to us. And from that, we can learn ways in which to keep striving to become the people we want to be. We can also learn not to take ourselves too seriously. Let's face it, most of our gawky moments are comical, and if we can learn to laugh at ourselves, we can learn to accept ourselves in the fullness of who we are. The best thing about David Niven's story of the wardrobe malfunction wasn't the comic image it presented. That was pretty darn good too. But the fact that he could laugh at himself enough to write about it in his autobiography, the book that would stand as testament to his life. But while we're shaking our heads, rolling our eyes, and chuckling at the comic side of awkwardness, let's not forget the unguarded reaction of a 5-year-old who bursts into tears. That is also a window of spiritual truth. Let that 5-year-old teach us compassion for our funny, feeble, frail, trying oh so hard selves, and more for the frailties and mistakes of others. Underlying the embarrassment of falling on your face is a real spiritual need. Remember Melissa Dull's advice from the passage Monica read a few minutes ago. The things that make you cringe are usually the things worth sharing because they help others feel less alone. In this time, like in no other, we need to feel less alone. The loss of social skills we're now experiencing through social distancing isn't permanent. We will get to be together again, and we will remember how it feels to be in loving community with all its awkwardness. So let me offer these words of G. Peter Fleck in The Blessings of Imperfection. Well, let's be frank and admit that the church has its aggravations, he writes. The eternal and oh so necessary concern about finances, the annually recurring problems of balancing the budget, of finding money for repainting the vestibule, repairing the boiler, and tuning the organ. The ongoing criticism of the minister's sermons, which are too liberal for some and too orthodox for others, too pedantic for some and too colloquial for others. The endless committee meetings about the Sunday school curriculum and about the propriety of social action, the persistent shortage of tenors in the choir. Who wants it? Who needs it? The answer is that we want it because we need it. The answer is that the church, and now I'm speaking of the liberal church, in spite of its shortcomings, the imperfection that characterizes everything made by humans, is better, infinitely better than no church. Maybe I should not have said in spite of its shortcomings, but because of its shortcomings. For isn't it true that in our churches, in these communities of spirit, we have more resources than outside our churches to accept each other's imperfections, to reconcile our differences, to forgive and be forgiven, to comfort and be comforted, to love and be loved? Isn't that what church is all about? Because it's what life is all about. I'm sure many of us long to share Sundays in the sanctuary on Foster Street again, as comfy as it may be to sit on the couch in your jammies. So when we come together again, let us remember that this place, this beloved community that we aspire to build, is a place where you are loved in the fullness of your humanity. A place where the values of common covenant are of sacred importance. And especially in this time of separation, may we remember that love is the spirit of this church. Come into this place where the ordinary is sanctified, the human is celebrated, and the compassionate is expected. The ridiculous in me honors the ridiculous in you. Namaste. Por lo tanto, puede ser. Our closing hymn today is number 1053, How Could Anyone? You can change the world with your love. These are the words we sang in our first hymn this morning. And as we gather to end this time together, I invite you, as is our custom, to join hands. If you have someone there with you that you can safely hold hands with, to take their hand. But if you're alone, to grasp your hands together and feel the warmth that we share as a community. For you can change the world with your love. The words, not only in a hymn, but words that direct our faith, that each and every one of us has the capacity to change the world with our love. May we create a community where we can bring the fullness of who we are, the sublime and the ridiculous, the magnificent and the awkward. May our love create this community where hearts can touch and be touched, heal and be healed, forgive and be forgiven. May our love create this community where compassion is expected. And may we go from here and be blessed. May we go into our days.
Our postlude today is called Honey. It's by R. Nathaniel Dett, a African-American composer who had a very prolific piano output at the turn of the 1900s. And he was one of the first composers to be featured in ASCAP, which is the American Society of Composers, that kind of unionized and had their music represented. So here is Honey.